Welcome to another episode of Nuggets with Sauce, the podcast dishing up bite-sized insights you can sink your teeth into, served with a saucy take on common leadership challenges by your host, Michelle Lawrence. Well, I am so excited to be back for yet another episode of Nuggets with Sauce. Hello, everybody. I am your host, Michelle Lawrence, and I am super delighted. I'm always delighted, but I'm extra super delighted today to have my good friend, Deborah Laurel here. Hello, Deb, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, wonderful. It always makes me happy when people are happy to be here. That's a win right out of the gate. But, for everybody listening or watching out there, Deb and I have, gosh, we've been connected for what, at least a year and a half now, I think. I mean, Deb's one of those folks who's regularly on my calendar because I just find it so valuable to have regular connections and conversations with her. And Deb is sitting on a bit of a gold mine that we are going to unpack. So like extra golden nuggets. There are golden nuggets to be had in today's episode with Deb. But as always, I like to start off by asking folks on nuggets to, without using job titles, we now go ahead and just share for our audience a little bit. What gets you really fired up? What's your magic mojo? What are you getting out of bed for every day, Deb, that you're bringing change and wonderful, better things to the world of business? Go ahead and share that with us, please.
Oh boy. Well, what gets me out of bed is I love training. I love seeing the light go on in people's eyes. I've had very bad experiences as an employee, so I love training managers so that they know what the blazes they're doing, so they can set employees up for success.
Yes.
I get very upset when I see bad training.
Yes. Yes, this is why you and I are so in simpatico around this, because I know I feel very passionate about the same things. Big problem out there, 100%. Bad training, 100%. Bad experiences, bad businesses. Totally get that. So you and I, of course, are very much on the same page. Now, the other thing I always like to ask is, do you have a recommended read, watch, or listen for audience? That's something that, again, we can help our thought leaders be a little more thoughtful in their leadership?
Well, I don't know about thought leaders, but certain in terms of leadership. But I've been reading two books by Julie Dirksen.
Julie Dirks.
One, How People Learn.
How People Learn. Okay.
Two, Talk to the Elephant, Designing Learning for Behavior Change, because that's what we want.
Right.
People to change behavior. We don't want edutainment. We don't want people to be bored to tears. We want them to come in, learn new skills, feel confident in their ability to use them, and then go out and change their behavior using those new skills.
Right, exactly. We are in behavioral change. Though I'm going to say I like some edutainment. I personally am a little edutaining, but I agree with you. Stop the death by PowerPoint. Nobody's learning when it's a snooze fest, right? Nobody learns when it's dull. We tune out. And then we go back to work and bad things happen.
Unfortunately, when we're talking about those accidental trainers.
Yes, let's get to those nuggets. Yes, ma'am. Accidental trainers.
High performers. They've been high performers. They've been sales stars, and somebody says, okay, you're going to be a manager tomorrow, or you're going to be a trainer tomorrow. And in either case, they don't have the skills.
Right.
They don't know what to do. Right. And if they're going to be a trainer, suddenly, what do they need? What do they know other than lecture?
No. Well, there's so many things that are wrong with that, right? I mean, it's like, hey, oh, LaShawn, you're the safest guy over here, so we're going to put you in charge of safety training. And meanwhile, LaShawn's sitting there going, well, I know how to be safe. I don't know how to make anybody else be safe. I don't know how to explain what I do. I don't know how
to read the handbooks to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's happening, right? Like we're looking around and we're going like, hey, you're the dude or you're the gal who you're my star performer. You seem to be the best one in the bunch at whatever. So my reward to you is punishment, 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 punishment. This is so huge. This is like such a golden nugget. Such a golden nugget, isn't it? I mean, the best way to ruin your best salesperson is put him in the sales manager position.
The problem with those accidental managers and those accidental trainers is that they didn't wake up that morning trying to crash and burn.
No.
But unfortunately, if they don't have the skills and the skills that they had that made them successful technicians or successful salespeople are not transferable. They don't necessarily mean that they know the interpersonal skills that are necessary, the management skills, how to delegate. I mean, that's a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to delegate.
Right.
They don't know how to give constructive feedback. They're maybe very unclear about what the assignments are.
Right.
It goes on in emotional intelligence, all of that.
Oh,
The
whole
package
grocery
of
list.
skills they need.
Yeah. I want to go back up for just a sec. I want to nibble on this little nugget you just dropped. I don't know if everybody caught this, but I think it's really important that we back up for just a second, because when you were talking about the kind of skills, I think it's super important that we recognize the differences in the kind of skills that people have. And you had just mentioned, the idea that, well, we're looking at their technical skills, like, hey, you rock a spreadsheet. That does not make you management material, right? So can you just help unpack a little bit? Let's dig a little deeper into those two kinds of skills that you were talking about, because you mentioned there's the technical piece, and then there's that whole, you mentioned interpersonal piece. Let's start with the technical. Can we just explain that a little bit better for anybody out there who might not be clear on what those two are and why it matters?
Well, those technical skills are what somebody needs to do their job well.
Mm-hmm.
Do they know how to read a plan? Do they know how to write a grant? Do they know how to close a sale?
Drive a forklift.
Drive a forklift.
Right.
But to be a manager, let's break this out. For the manager, what the manager needs is to have interpersonal management skills. To know how to
management skills.
To know how to speak to employees, to know how to create a motivational environment, to know how to build a team, to know what to do when conflict arises. I mentioned delegation. I mentioned emotional intelligence, being able to control their own feelings. We have seen on television, and some of us have experienced it personally with managers who blow up, who can't manage their own frustrations, and they take it out on employees.
Who doesn't have a bad boss story out there around that sort of thing, right? Yeah, that like you're pointing and you're yelling and you're blaming and all those things, like everybody just stand back. Yeah.
I actually had a manager who was so upset with me, he threw me against a wall.
That's assault.
That is assault. Yeah.
That's very extreme. That's frightening. I mean, that is so beyond uncool. I mean, that's an obvious one. Holy cow, I can't, that's horrible to hear that. Even if it's not down to the physical threat, and I bet there's a lot of people out there who know or have experienced something like you just shared, Deb. That's crazy. But even the verbal assault that we can sometimes get from people, and why are they that way? I mean, do you ever get the sense that it's like in part because they're frustrated with the fact that nobody did anything to help them be in this situation and they don't know how to handle themselves and other people?
I'm sure there's a huge amount of frustration and stress, whether they recognize it's because they don't have the skills to do it or whether they're just frightened by the situation. and don't
Can't
know how
show
to
fear.
deal with angry feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, we have one extreme where they're violent and and hopefully that's not the norm. We
Hopefully
have
not.
the other extreme where they're absentee,
Yeah.
where you're kind of left floating. You're in a limbo as an employee. You have no idea. Am I doing it right? Am I doing what was expected?
Yeah.
And then when evaluations come once a year, as opposed to an ongoing conversation, which is what coaching should be all about,
Right.
if they're just waiting for that end of the year, wondering what the blazes, I don't know what they're going to say to me.
Yeah. And then it's too late. Like, I don't know about you, but I have a heck of a time remembering, like, what did I have for breakfast a week ago, let alone what I might have done 6 months or a year ago. And again, that's why I always say feedback just becomes another F word if you don't know how to do it. And that's part and parcel of it. But I think you're really touching on some core things here is, it's not their fault. When we talk about those accidental managers in the space of like, nobody prepared me for this. So you're right, they might be frightened. And God forbid we, ever admit we're fearful of anything or we don't have the answers. We put people in these positions on these impossible pedestals, don't we? And you're supposed to be able to do all this stuff, but nobody's ever said, how are you supposed to be able to do all that stuff? And again, the core of the nugget that you're sharing here that I love is, these are very particular skill sets. What the technical capability of being great in a role doesn't mean that you're going to be great when that doesn't make you great at turning that into something else in your role, whether it's the accidental manager. And I've seen some literature coming out, articles coming out in the last few months around this, and it's disastrous. Popped into a leadership position because we see you as a rock star, but not as a rock star of people, but a rock star of, again, that technical skill set. And then we look at our accidental trainers, similar kind of a situation where, again, they might be like, they're frustrated, they're fearful, they're not going to do a great job because, again, it's like, oh, you're really good at whatever, so now you're in charge of something, but we haven't really set you up for success of what you're in charge of. Because now you're not just filling in a spreadsheet, you're trying to teach other people how to use the spreadsheet. That's a very different skill set.
It is. And any parent who's watching knows how frustrating it can be to try to teach somebody something we know well because we are unconsciously competent. And there's a lot of things that we do without being aware of it.
Right. Good.
So we miss those steps.
Yeah.
We take technical folks and we put them into training positions. This is not to say that they can't be good trainers.
True.
It's just they're not set up to be successful as trainers.
Right.
And unless they go and get some assistance, they have to do whatever will get them through the day.
Right. Survival mode. And survival mode isn't thriving mode, right? Oh, they'll get through the day. But what's the ripple effect of somebody who, and I would challenge anybody watching or listening to this, think of how it feels when you know what you're doing and you're doing a great job and you are thriving at doing something. Versus think of a time when you got thrown in the deep end unprepared and had to survive whatever that situation is. Just pause for a moment and think, how did that make you feel? And what impact would that have? I mean, it's great. I love bringing up you always kind of feel, I always feel a little bit weird about bringing the analogy of parenting into this. I had an earlier episode with Andy Height where we talked as well about there are a lot of parallels between parenting and leading in business. And I think you're spot on to say, as a parent, you're a parent, you've raised your kids, and it's like, it's hard you want to see your kids succeed. You should want to see your employees succeed as well. And what lengths would you go to as a parent to help your kid do well? Why aren't we doing that for our employees?
Right. So, and we do have to be careful about the parent
Of course, of course. I mean, we're not, that's
because
why I say I'm a
we
little,
have
a little
we
weird.
have some managers who, are babysitting,
Yes, and some managers,
don't treat their employees as adults,
yeah,
micromanage, don't give them an opportunity to stretch their wings, don't give them an opportunity to make decisions,
I think that's called helicopter parenting.
and micromanaging in the
Right.
work site.
Right. Or they're abusive and neglectful. Like you said, like we're back to the I don't even know what you're thinking until I get T-boned at the intersection at my annual performance appraisal and find out all this stuff that you didn't like, but I didn't know about.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's face it, the manager going into those annual, and I don't support annual reviews,
Me neither.
uh, is own unless they've been keeping notes, which means they've been in touch with that employee throughout the year, which means that they both know what the employee should be working on and what's going well and what isn't and what needs to be fixed.
There's that skill set again.
That is the skill set. That's right.
They're not going to remember anything.
And we don't, I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea of generational differences in terms of what people need on the job. I think we all want to be treated with respect, regardless of how old or how young we are. We all want to have be recognized for what we accomplish. We all want to be given an opportunity to make a difference and to know that we're making a difference
Right.
in large or small way.
Yeah. I
Uh,
agree. I think the fundamentals are always there. To me, the generational difference, this is going to be a whole other conversation for another day, of course, but to me, the difference isn't the underpinning is the same. We all want to be set up for success. We want to be supported. We want to be led by great leaders. We want to be given the opportunities to do well. We want to be rewarded well for what we do. All those, I mean, we all want the same stuff. I think the generational difference in my mind comes in terms of more like what angle am I coming in from or how maybe I would like to go about doing some of those things. But the target at the end, the target that we're all going for is the common ground. And again, if we don't set our folks up who are put in these accidental spaces of, whether it's accidental management and leadership or whether it's accidental training, I mean, imagine what it's like to try to be the accidental trainer in a company where it's like, I don't really understand some of these dynamics and differences. So I don't really know how to teach people in different ways. I mean, people, never mind the generational stuff, people learn in different ways. I fight the fight all the time in learning and development. Like, is this just going to be something people read? Because some of us need to hear it. And some of us do better by seeing images or, there's all kinds of things that we need to put in the mix. Do they know that?
right, right.
The old
And
death by PowerPoint, right?
yes, and when you think about the accidental trainer,
Mhm.
if I've been doing a good job on my job and somebody says, Deb, you're good at this, go tomorrow, you're going to teach other people. That's a very terrifying place
And
to
you're
be.
like, mm,
And the only model that I've got, if I went to college, for example,
if,
is lecture.
yeah,
So I guess I have to lecture, which is really hard to do. It's really hard to do well because when I talk about lecture and you talk about lecture, we're talking about lecturettes. We're
yeah.
talking about 5 or 10 minutes and then check for comprehension.
Right. Like,
Give
hey,
people something to apply.
it's one thing to sit there and say, hey, I need to share some core information. There's no other way around it than to explain it to you, talk it through. But if all you're doing is talk, or even worse, and I think you'll agree with me 100%, please don't read it off your slides. Did I
And
say
also,
please
don't spend all the time telling us all the things that you've been able to accomplish. I was auditing a training program, and it was a highly rated training program because the expert who came in was well liked. Well, he was well liked. He told lots of stories. When people left, they left saying, "Boy, I wish I knew what he does." As opposed to, okay, I now know what to do. I have some confidence.
Wow.
That person has shared some tips. I know what I can do it for myself
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Very different
Very
feeling.
different. Yeah. I mean, we've got to help these accidental trainers understand what's the desired outcome and how do we get to that outcome. So if you expect somebody on your staff, like, I know you have a particular focus and interest in the manufacturing space and the nonprofit space, and, a couple different spaces, but I know from my experience in a background in manufacturing, like, the outcome is I want everybody to go home at the end of the day in one piece, injury free. Okay, how are we going to make sure that everybody knows what to do or what not to do in a space that says everybody walks out of this building at the end of their shift or the end of their day in one piece, uninjured? And then we can think about what will it take to help people know what to do and not just what to do. Would
But
you
what not to do?
how to do it and maybe even possibly why? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing, I always love the Simon Sinek's why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way? How can I do it? As well as what can I do?
That issue of why, moving aside Simon Sinek's meaning for that, what I have seen very often is managers will say, "This is what I want you to do, and this is how I want you to do it," but we don't tell them why.
Yeah,
And without the why, it's very hard to make decisions.
right.
It's very hard to get committed to it.
How am I supposed to feel engaged? Yeah, how are we supposed to, we talk a lot about we have very disengaged workforces. I think Gallup's latest number was something like 77%. Okay, so more than 3 out of 4 people. So anybody who's listening or watching, do the math on your staff. What's that number? Aren't really engaged, and engagement is tied to outcomes, productivity, how much effort are they making and what they're doing. And you're absolutely right. If I don't feel connected to it, I don't understand why we're doing this. Why would I ever get committed or engaged in doing it? What's the point of this? This just feels like another futile exercise. I mean, we've all seen this happen. We've probably all lived through this. It's the futile exercise in oh, here we go again. I have to do blah, blah annual compliance training. Why? I think it's because we're supposed to check a box. That's why I'm doing this, because there's a box to be checked.
And if you are someone who doesn't understand training, you may pick up whatever somebody did before and do that again.
Right.
And people have been through it and they're bored with it, as opposed to saying, okay, this is a refresher. Let's go at it a different way. What are the problems that you're facing? What are the tips that you've come up with? A whole different way to design. I'm getting into design. And I think that
Love it. I'm getting
people
out of design.
when people are thrown into training positions,
yeah,
they need to understand, how do we design for learning?
right.
You were mentioning different learning preferences, but beyond that,
Mhm.
what level of learning do we want to accomplish?
Right.
When we're lecturing, all we're achieving is a knowledge base.
Right. Right.
Doesn't mean they understand it, doesn't mean they know what to do with it, doesn't mean they can do anything with it. And so
I just went through an exercise with a prospective client around that was saying, okay, this is the issue we're trying to address for your managers. Okay, let's have a conversation around those different levels of knowledge and action. At the end of the day, when, total success in this project would look like, sound like, feel like what are these people doing? At a multitude of levels, not just because what's the point in walking away knowing something? Unless you're, a trivia champion, in which case that's great. But I don't think most of us are paying full paychecks to have trivia champions on board. And I think I want to step back for a sec too and dip that nugget in a little more sauce over here around what you said too, in terms of if somebody's being put in that accidental trainer position where they may, if they're, maybe we'll call it lucky, if they inherit somebody else's material. So at least you don't have to invent the wheel from scratch. But yes, love what you're saying in the space of the idea is that doesn't mean it's any good. Just because somebody else did it doesn't mean that it's fresh, that it's relevant, that it was done well. It was just done. Would you then say that the same thing tracks and applies when we talk about our accidental managers and leaders as well? That if all you know is an example from whatever else you've seen, or you kind of inherit whatever some other person has done, again, we're kind of back to parenting, we model what we see and what we learn. So, if this is what we see as an example of, how we lead, then you might model that for yourself unless you deliberately go out of your way to find something else. And that perpetuates some bad management, doesn't it? Am I making any sense? I'm like, my head's going in.
Yeah, you are.
You went on this nugget really hard. I'm loving it. Spilling juice all over the place. The sauce is going everywhere. It's great.
I think that there is something like a 60% fail rate for new managers in 2 years.
True. Yes, that is true. 60% fail rate, which correlates perfectly with 60% of people in the role never prepped in the first place.
And 75% of employees who leave voluntarily, leaving because of a bad manager.
Correct.
So there's this whole terrible domino churning effect that's going on.
Yeah.
And what is worse is that not only are the managers not necessarily set up to be successful, made sure that they've had the skills when they go into the job so they can be successful, but they're so often siloed.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have the option or feel comfortable asking for help, asking for, well, how have you handled this kind of thing? Because they literally don't have those connections.
Right. Where's their network? Where's their mentoring? Where's their cohort of fellow learners in the support environment, right? Like, hey, why don't we all sit down and talk about what are the best practices here of being a leader in this organization? And then we have a community of learners and people practicing that and making that safe space to say, I'm not really sure. Like, I'd rather have somebody ask than assume. That's that. I mean, again, when do accidents, first of all, most accidents aren't even accidental. Like, they're car crashes. They're not really accidents, right? Like, mistakes get made sometimes because either, to your point, I'm afraid to show any vulnerability. I don't want anybody to know that I don't know. So I'll either blunder ahead and make mistakes and tick people off, or maybe I'll just do nothing. I'm not going to make a move at all. And then again, it's that disconnect and we're all sitting around thinking everybody else has got their act together. It's just me. Not true. Yeah, I think that's a really critical thing. I mean, if you want to, get the accident out of the accidental, in part is being intentional about helping people not feel isolated in terms of whatever their ability to do something new is. Don't isolate them in their new leadership role. Don't isolate them in their new training role.
And make sure that they have the supports that they need. Yeah. I mean, and all of this that we're talking about happens at this level. What about here? I mean, because that is where the buck stops.
At the top.
If the organizational culture, which flows from upper management, doesn't support helping somebody feel comfortable making mistakes and asking questions and looking for help and having people voluntarily provide that help.
Right.
it's not a very safe environment, and it's not going to be a one where anybody thrives.
No, no, they will at best survive while they've got their head down, quietly quitting and looking for somewhere else to be, where they, they will look for the support, and it can be as simple as even proactively asking them. First of all, and I always say this in the space of, management in particular, but I think I would say this on any level for what you and I are talking about today. How about instead of throwing people in the deep end of the pool and then asking, do you like water? A little late at that point. How about we ask them in advance, are you interested in swimming? And would you like to get into the deep end of the pool? We can help get you there. Because there's also that element of not everybody is well suited to teach or train. Not everybody is well suited to lead people. And the proactive approach says, let's ask instead of telling, and then let's prepare them for it instead of just, shoving them off the edge and then saying, go figure it out. What's wrong with you? So support can also come at the front end. Like, don't ask somebody to start doing safety training or whatever kind of training it is, technical training, any kind of training in your organization without first making sure that they are well prepared and in a safe space to maybe practice it, try it on, make sure that they even want to do this in the first place. You might be, I think a lot of people would be pleasantly surprised to find out who you might not think would raise their hand and say, actually, I'd like to take a shot at that. They might not be your best performer technically. We're back to those technical skills, but they might have those right interpersonal skills that could make them a better fit for that role. And then they're not accidental, then they're intentional.
I like that idea. Then I was doing a pre-supervisory training program. And at the end, I had someone come up to say, after going through this, I know I don't want to be a supervisor.
Boom. Let them self-select
I have the
out.
temperament for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just as important as people having the skills, leaving that training or training programs or mentoring or whatever supports they've been given, and deciding, yes, I want to do this. And I now know I have a good model. I have some ideas of what to do. I see what's acceptable. I see what's been done in the past. I know how I want to change things, or I want to continue things as they are.
Right. To me, you and I have talked about this, but it comes down to be clear on the price of admission. I don't want to go into a store and not know any of the prices until it's too late and I'm about to pay, and then I find out and get sticker shock. I don't think anybody in an organization appreciates if there's a price of admission for being a manager here, you've got to level up to a different, get over a higher bar. Get clear with people up front. What does that mean? If you want to, if you're interested in being in the space of being the intentional trainer in our organization, the person who can help others be and do better in that space, what does that look like? That's different from your day job. Let people know what they're in for. So to your point, they can self-select out and say, actually, you know what, now that you tell me what that is, I don't think I'm gonna buy the hot sports car, because I think the decimal's in the wrong place. Fair enough. And then you don't have to, then you're not in that horrible space of like, wow, I got in over my head and made a mess. And believe me, they're going to mess up a lot of people, not just themselves.
What we've been talking about really comes down to being intentional on all levels.
Absolutely.
You're going to want me I'm a good forklift driver, and you're going to want me to train other people. Well, give me some skills to do that.
Yeah.
Side before the day of.
Right.
Yeah,
I love it. I think that's what we need to kind of encapsulate this whole conversation in, is let's get off the accidental and let's get intentional. We don't want or need accidental managers. We don't need accidental trainers. We need intentional in that space. So that's what I want to leave our audience with here today. Deb, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience in this. You have definitely shared some excellent nuggets today. And I have to say, I think the sauce was both tangy and creamy at the same time. Very smooth, but also like, hey, there's enough zing behind this. Pay attention, right? This is a wake up kind of a flavor to our nuggets today. So thank you so much, Deb. And I can't wait to get you back on another episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you on another one. Thanks for joining this episode of Nuggets with Sauce. I hope we fed your appetite for insights and information on how to improve your business. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never go hungry for more thought leadership.